Start. Okay. That's good. All right. Good afternoon, everybody. If you have the space teachers linked to class, you can mark that off your bingo board. Who all do we have today? Brian is there. Adeline? Adeline. I did it again. It's only once a week. This is going to take a while. Adeline. I wish I could annotate the names on this thing somehow. Ariel. There. Giselle. Online. Carlos. He's here. He's not there. Let's see him. We'll see. Jasmine. There. Cynthia. There. And Denver. Denver, don't see Carlos. Anybody email me? Carlos did. Okay. He should be coming in shortly. Whew! All right. I think I have embodied this quote pretty well today, huh? I took some chances, got to talking to people, I made a mistake, and things got messy. But we're back on track. We learned from it. And I learned life is never as long as you want it to be. Isn't that the case? All right. Thank you, Ms. Fizzle, for the words of wisdom. Now, onward to today. We are, once again, back in chapter 0 of our textbook. And today I actually want to talk about how to read the textbook. That'll be our key idea here. Is math reading. Math reading, spelling is important. Our math reading keys, how to read a math textbook for understanding. Right? Because I think we can all at least acknowledge that a textbook approach is going to be different than reading a storybook. Right? You're going to go into the Harry Potter series different than you would a textbook from school. You're going to approach things differently. You're going to think about the words as you come across them differently. And so I want to emphasize that aspect, what makes it unique, and especially when it comes to a math text. Because we're going to be doing, as you've already discovered so far this year, we're going to be doing a lot of reading in this class, even more so. So, I have for you a 7-step process. The math reading keys. This is presented as a bookmark. It's posted there. If you want to print it out and cut it to size and paste it in your book, you can do so. I'm going to talk through these points and how they apply to our specific example. We'll be using this chapter today. In fact, your goal for today is to read through the entirety of the rest of this chapter. It's actually not that long. We saw last time, section 0.1, we read that Last week that was 3 pages of text. The next section is even shorter. It's like 2 pages, and then it hits exercises. All right, there's Carlos. Thanks for joining us. So it's not actually too bad. So when you approach these, first thing to keep in mind, please read carefully. Please, if you can, read slower than you would on your own. You're trying to extract information. Take your time. Requires processing. And Denver's in as well. Awesome. Okay. Read through. This says, make sure every sentence makes sense. And I would agree with that. Pause. Every time you see that period, that should be an indicator of you should stop and think for a second. Maybe 2 or 3 seconds if necessary. Does what I just read make sense? This is especially true for a textbook, especially a math textbook. They tend to be very dense in their ideas. One sentence can contain a lot of information. We really saw that with the what is geometry, how is it used in the real world part of it. And every sentence there was a brand new idea with tons of stuff happening in it. Complex sentences. Right? There's a lot to unpack there. Whereas other times, other texts, maybe you go more of a paragraph by paragraph approach. Right? And so stop after each sentence, check the paragraph. Did that whole paragraph make sense? Stop at the end of each section. Okay, did that whole section make sense? Reflect on those as you go. And then you can ask yourself the following question. What does the author assume I already know? What previous math knowledge, other concepts mentioned before, did I already learn? Either in last year's class, or maybe it's just the chapter before the last unit, right? Because the author has written chapter 2 of the book, expecting you to have gone through chapter 1. Right? And if you wouldn't start a story halfway through, and say, well, you wouldn't start a math textbook halfway through without some of that prior knowledge. So as you go, ask yourself, what should I already be understanding? What things here, for example, does the author assume already make sense to you? Because he's not bothering to explain. Nowhere does he define what a crystal is. Honeycomb, snowflakes, spiral shells. The author is assuming you know what those are. The author is assuming here you have an idea what a hexagon is. Right? It's going to highlight, say, hey, look, you can see hexagons in beecombs. Oh, yeah, I guess those are honeycombs. And they are shaped like hexagons. I never really thought of that. But it doesn't tell you what a hexagon is. Like, you were supposed to learn that in 3rd or 4th grade, whatever. Right? So there's some prior knowledge that the author has expected you to have. You want to stop and check on that. So that could be terms in that are just not defined, or other concepts that lead into this. This chapter is going to be fairly light on those. There's not a lot of geometry it expects you to have before you start geometry. This is chapter 0, after all. So that'll be a short question, but it's an important one because that could be why you're not understanding something. Because you're missing a piece that is assuming you already knew. All right, next step. Stop and summarize each sentence in your own words. Explain all the math concepts that you have learned before. That sounds hideously tedious. You do not have to write all that out. Right? This is a mental exercise. This is a pause at the end. Hey, did I get what was going on? If yes, can you summarize it? Would you short it? Oh, he's talking about Parts here. Oh, honeycombs, hexagons, got it. As long as you can link the ideas together, shorten it in your mind, you're all set. And then ask yourself, can you explain the math concepts you learned before? Don't like go through a whole essay in your head every time. Like, well, 2 plus 2 equals 4, here's why. You're not going to get all that done. That's slowing down too much. But check whether you could. If I had to, could I explain the topics here? So you don't feel the need every sentence. Right? This is the best, slowest, most in-depth approach. We're going to compromise a little bit. Okay? For today's task, I want you to go through the whole chapter, but you're not going to stop and answer these every sentence. We're going to address each of these points for every section. Okay? So each section only has a few paragraphs to it. So you're going to address for section 2, what is the prior knowledge the author is expecting? Summarize section 2. Right? Section 3, you summarize that whole section. Don't go sentence by sentence, but you'll summarize the entire section. Right? That's the part I will have you write down for today. Okay? 4. This is one of those that should go without saying, but we have to say it. Be explicit. Right? Please be sure to reread parts that you are not able to summarize. That's your test. You ask yourself, did I understand it? If you think the answer is yes, okay, summarize it for me. And if you go, give me a minute, go back and read it, right? That's your check. If you can't summarize, go back and reread. And maybe if that's still not helping, maybe the problem is, again, that prior knowledge. You need something else in there that the author thought you had and you missed. Maybe you need to go back, read further, or find something else. Go research somewhere else. Look something up online. Hey, what was that? Hexagon, what again? Double check. Okay. Number 5, unfortunately, we're not going to be able to do much of it this year, but in an ideal world, you'd be able to stop and discuss this with somebody. Right? Explain what you understand, and then clarify anything that you don't understand. This is great because some people pick up on one part of the passage, some people pick up on another part. Right? You've done this kind of thing in English class all the time. But it's also important to do in math. Because math texts have tons of bits of information. It's very easy to lose track of someone. And then the other area, explaining what you already know. It sounds redundant. Okay? I've been in that class before. Everybody read the same thing. Everybody got it. Yes, we all understand. Okay. Now talk to each other. And you're all saying the same thing to each other. It's super boring. However, it helps enhance your understanding. It really does. It cements it in your mind. If you really know something, you'll be able to explain it to somebody else. Right? That's your test. Right? The best way to get to learn something, as they say, is to try to teach it. Because then you'll be forced to try to summarize it using your own words. Even better, using words that somebody else will understand. And when you can make that happen, then you've got that idea on lockdown. So we will occasionally, throughout the year, I will have you write out an explanation for something. Even though you're just explaining it to me, I want you to treat it. And I'll set this up, right? Maybe it'll be, address the audience. Pretend you have to explain this to a 5-year-old, right? The old ELI 5, right? Explain like I'm 5. Use that approach. All right, number 6. This is the big one. The key difference between math and all other readings. Read it with a pencil. Read it with a pencil. Work the examples. They're there for a reason. Okay? Reading through the examples is one thing. But you should get in the habit of writing them out. They make excellent sources in your notes. If you write out the example, you'll then be able to check back on it later. And usually textbooks are very good at setting up examples exactly of the types of problems they're going to ask you to answer. Super useful. But just reading it doesn't help. Maybe a little bit. The brain has been studied. We've analyzed this. We have found out that just reading something once doesn't help you remember it. Writing it out helps lock it into your brain. Typing, somewhere in the middle, it's better than nothing. Better than just reading it. But actually, handwritten notes are the way to go. You really want to remember something, write it down. We will talk a little more tomorrow about how to create some digital notes, but for today, I highly recommend writing this stuff out by hand, and then you just take pictures and upload them. It does work better. So working out the examples, and even more so, I'm going to add in one here because it's geometry class. Draw pictures. This is a hugely visual course. Look back at the book. Section 1 had tons of pictures. Section 2 has, I'd say that's 2 paragraphs. Pictures, pictures, pictures. 2 more sentences, that's barely an extra paragraph. More pictures and diagrams. That's it, that's the end. There's barely any words here at all. This is a very image-heavy text. This is very common with geometry. So your notes cannot just be writing down words and definitions. You can't just read through and expect to understand what's going on. You need to interpret the images that go along with it. They're there for a reason. So reading with your pencil means drawing stuff. No, I don't expect you to try redrawing the Japanese design and architecture here. I don't want you, that'll take you forever. Right? But the things that look like simple line drawings, heck yeah, draw one of those. They give you a step-by-step of how to create this. Like, all right, add that to your notes. Right? There'll be several of those in the next one, the circles. Here again. Maybe you don't have a compass on hand to draw a perfect circle, but you can make a quick sketch, get the idea down. That's all the notes are. They're just a reference to engage your mind. Say, hey, remember this? The perfect version is in the textbook. You can refer to that if you have to. Your notes are the quick version. So read with a pencil. Work out the examples. Draw stuff. Maybe reread it after you work through the example. Now go back to the description. Be like, oh yeah, okay, now that I've done that, all that definition makes so much more sense now. And then finally, step 7, speaking of definitions, explanations for new math terms. Definitely add those to your notebook. Again, it's that process of writing it down, helps lock it into your memory. If you're one that struggles with vocabulary, then maybe you should not just your notebook, but also make some flashcards, just index cards, just put the new math term there, definition on the back, quiz yourself every once in a while. Now, as you might expect, like many other textbooks, vocabulary terms have been made easy to spot. Can anyone take a look at that paragraph and find the new special vocabulary term I want you to learn from this? What do you think it is? Stands out. What stands out to you? The regular hexagon, because it's in bold. Exactly. And in this case, it's also blue. If the color is showing through. Okay? So, our text uses bold blue words to highlight key new vocabulary terms. Right? So those are the ones you should definitely be writing down, underline, highlight, star, whatever, in your notes. Say, hey, regular hexagon. And then you're going to have to work through the paragraph, context clues to figure out what the exact definition does. It doesn't like have it in a separate box for us. It's not that generous. But I think we can work pretty well here. This is a regular hexagon, comma, a 6-sided figure size the same length, and these angles are all the same size. Huh. That's a pretty standard in paragraph definition format. Word, comma, its definition. So there you go. You would want to write all of that stuff down and make it stand out in your notes so you can reference it later. Okay? That's the process. Remember, you're trying to extract the information. So the more you can make things stand out and be like, hey, this is a unique idea. And so you have a cluster of ideas instead of just a mash of text. That's what you're aiming for. You're translating a giant block of text into individual components that you can sit through and analyze on a later date. Okay. As I mentioned, tomorrow we'll talk about some digital tools specifically, and then Wednesday we'll get into actual notes formatting. I'm going to have you use a variation of Cornell notes going forward. But for this bit today, on the classroom post here, I have the truncated version, right, of those keys that I want you to do. So for each section in the chapter, we already did section 1, so you'll start with 2, go through 6, so that's 5 sections. Again, they're all like 2 pages of text at most, and half of that's pictures, so it's not a lot. Read through, whole thing, all of the boxes inside references, make sure you at least read those. Maybe you'll find something cool, maybe you'll want to check something out, and go, hey, you can learn more about this bridge if you go Google this. Okay, let me go Google that for a minute. Fine. And then you'll answer question 2. That was the prior knowledge. What does the author expect you to already know for this section? Right? For the whole section, what's the prior knowledge? 3, summarize the whole section. Just a couple sentences. Right? 1 or 2 should be sufficient. 3 if you need to. If you're at 5 sentences, your summary is too long. Make it shorter. And then 4, come up with one question, either about something you don't understand, something you're wondering about, maybe it confuses you, maybe you're just curious, like, oh, what about this thing? Is there more to that? Or, hey, this reminds me of this thing I saw on TV last week. Is there a connection? Wonder about this? Or I wonder when I would use this in real life. Maybe that's your question there. Okay. Anything you don't understand or wonder about. And then 5, to go along with work with the pencil, add a sketch. Include at least 1 picture for each section. Maybe 2. Right? Sometimes we'll have 2 different accompanying subjects or diagrams that you think would fit. Whatever best matches your summary, include 1 visual element to go along with that. Questions on the process for today? Zoom, any questions? All right, then at 1:40, 1:20, you've got 20 minutes to work. You could probably finish the section in 5-10 minutes tops. Okay. You'll be able to do at least 2 of them right now. You do that. I'm going to be reading through your stuff on Friday. Not Friday, Wednesday.
For each of the sections, which are these, right? Those are cool.
Yeah.
So we're supposed to answer the second. Are we supposed to make a doc out of it and answer the questions, or just force?
Yeah, write out your answer there.
Okay.
So either type them up in the document or write it out loud.
Okay, thank you.
We're just independently working here. I'm going to stop the YouTube stream. Thanks for tuning in.